Today I have Travis Owens out of Syracuse, New York, and Travis is actually the man behind the camera for a YouTube channel that he and his wife Jamie have. It's actually called The Society Girl. That's actually spelled Gurl. And along with his love for videography, Travis has made a name for himself in the programming world. Most recently, he's been doing a lot of stuff focused in on C#, ASP.NET. It's getting a little bit deeper than my knowledge already right there, but also WinForms, console apps, and Oracle. So Travis, welcome to Collectors Hangout. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me.
Perfect. So Travis, it's actually been quite a story for you and I to actually make a connection. 3 years in the making, and we have Hannah Silver to thank for that. Hannah was, I don't know if you had a chance to check out the interview I had with Hannah from episode 3 with for Collectors Hangout, where we featured her synthesizer collection. How did you actually make the connection with Hannah?
Okay. Well, Google Hangouts had a social scene at one point, social video chat, and there was rooms and stuff back then. And I ran into her a few times, and I used to dabble in music myself, but I gave that up long ago. But we used to chat now and then. So it was kind of funny when I saw her name pop up in one of your past episodes. I did watch part of it.
Yeah, it was one of those episodes where I wish I could erase it from the internet, but it is out there for anyone that wants to go down the archive route of Collectors Hangout. So, well, cool. I mean, yeah, I know that she had pinged me actually specifically on some of the subjects that we're going to be talking about tonight with mason jars. I know you collect mason jars, and then also uranium glass, and we have a little bit of a joke that I think that you picked up on with the fact that we had the event with the radioactive emblem. But so with collecting for you for kind of mason jars, uranium glass, how did you actually get into doing this, collecting of glassware? It was kind of something new to me when I started, going down and doing more research in this area.
Okay. So it's a rather recent hobby, collecting these two types of items. Before we were doing the YouTube thing, me and my wife used to sell antiques. So we'd go to auctions and buy things and sell it. And it was mason jars were really picking up, thanks to Pinterest pictures. It was getting really popular a few years ago. So we would just buy, you'd see these a lot, these classic blue, mason jars. They're not too old, they're 50 years old or so. And we would just buy them and sell them because we could get them, get a big box of them and sell them. And we started getting different ones, and we just have a couple laying around. I thought the color was interesting. So it just kind of grew on me, so to speak, and I'd keep one or two, and it just kept going.
And with the mason jars that are collectible for antique collectors, they differ from the mason jars that you can obviously buy just off the shelf that you might see in kind of like a Michael's store or something like that, or AC Moore. What can you tell us about the content of the glass itself and why you get that bluish hue? I don't know how much in the weeds we want to get in terms of, the makeup and how that normally works versus the clear glass that you would see from a standard mason jar now.
Sure. So back to this one again, because this is the closest one to a modern mason jar you see these days. So these were intentionally colored blue. It kind of became their signature, kind of like how Coke has that green color, but those colors weren't intentionally picked. I'll get into that in a moment. So, and this has kind of come back into fashion these days. So, if you said, you go to craft stores or whatever, you can buy new versions of these. And I'm even starting to see green and purple, amethyst actually. And so what happened was they weren't. So while this is actually intentionally colored this way, it was actually an accident. What really happened? So if you go really far back. Where did I put There we go. Some of these stranger shapes. Like here's a pretty good example of they're shaped way differently at some point. This blue is not intentional. It's not intentionally colored. You can even see maybe it doesn't show up on camera so well. The hue's a little different. What happened was you go far enough in the past, 100 years ago, they didn't have a way to refine the sand. So whatever was in the sand, whatever metallics were in the sand,
Mm-hmm.
would usually end up leading to what the glass was colored. So I don't remember off the top of my head what the blue is, that creates the blue color, but
Yeah.
it was just what's in the sand. Just like how with Coke bottles they have that kind of that greenish color. Same
Yep.
thing with Coke. They didn't pick the green. It was just what was in the sand that they used.
Yeah, it's just the impurities that were in the sand that bring out.
And since they're sampling, they're just digging up one giant spot. Generally, everything was generally the same color. Sometime in the early 1900s, they figured out how to refine the sand, and then glass became clear. And actually, for the next 80 to 100 years, that's why so much glass is clear, because glass isn't, it's not clear naturally. It would have always been colored.
Yeah.
Some color.
Now, you also were showing some really interesting things. I noticed the actual lips of the jars were slightly different, and I wanted to get into a little bit more about the history of the Mason Jar Company and how that started. So, correct me if I'm wrong on my history about this, but when Mason jars actually started to be made, it was actually from an American. It was John Mason, I believe, that actually came up with the patent on being able to have a lid and then a cap, and everything would be then sealed off with a rubber seal also. And that replaced a jar that was used to have to be sealed with wax, and then also I think there were some people that tried to do it with cork, but obviously both of those materials didn't have the same sealing properties as what Mr. Mason came about. Is that fairly close to the history, or what can you correct me on that?
That's pretty much it. I mean, obviously, when it comes to preventing mold and stuff, between boiling, salty, and vinegar, those three things together, pretty much nothing's going to usually grow in there. Obviously, you want to be able to see inside the jar so you can make sure it's all fine, but generally nothing's going to grow. Hence why your pickles can sit in your fridge for 2 years and you can still eat them. But yeah, the screw mechanism is fairly modern. I forgot the exact decade, or early 1900s, because they were doing other things. So you say mason jars, and they've also became known as Ball Mason. In fact, that's even the bigger name, Ball Perfect Mason, because Ball was a company that was very smart businessman, because he would keep, anytime someone invented something, they'd buy it up. So it's like you don't have to worry about competition if you just keep eating them up, and they would then buy them up. So, for example, there was one company, it was called the Lightning Jar Company, because it was the quickest way to seal a jar, which is this mechanism, and because it was literally this, you just turn it and then that's it, it pops off. So as you can see, there's no screw mechanism on this. This is a perfect example where, in mid-1900s, they started using rubber seals, which were rather effective, but they would also just use wax back then,
Okay.
that'd be close enough. And, that's all it is. It was lightning because it was just simply two steps, and it's basically on there, and it's pretty good. I mean, for the time.
Yeah, so if you can actually hold it up so I can actually kind of explain it to our podcast listeners. So what this is it has the portion that you have on top is an actual glass piece, correct also?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you have a metal, almost like a hinge hook.
Like a double hinge.
Yeah, that swings over. Now, would there be some type of also sealing that when this was boiled, it would expand and contrast in terms of being able to seal better with that mechanism that the Lightning Company came up with, or was it just that spring load almost?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, generally wax, or later on the rubber seal, but it depends on the decade, of course, and
Okay.
I don't have an example of everything, but there's different ideas, and there was different takes on it, because obviously, this is the cutting edge of technology.
Yeah.
This was the invention of the iPhone, 100 years ago. So there was
Yeah.
different mechanisms that did the same thing. This one functions similar, but it's very different. So this one it's actually like a metal ball, that turns, and it just the lid has a half
Oh,
circle in it.
okay.
That's just rust, but same thing. It's like, and by the way, you can see, if my camera will focus, it's very rough, the glass here. It's not like it's not to cut you, but it's just it'd be sanded with like a stone or something.
Uh-huh.
That's one of the nice giveaways of old jars, of course, is because more modern jars. I mean, these are nice and smooth, and then the
Yeah.
older ones very, very rough, you know. But there's just different mechanisms companies were playing with, and like I said before, Ball being a very smart business company would keep buying up all the competition,
Yeah.
and so
Now
try.
the ball company was named after an individual. It wasn't named after a mechanism that they actually created. Like that you had mentioned that there was a
Correct.
ball on top of that one
Yeah,
to
purely
help seal it.
coincidence.
Yeah, yeah. Very good. Okay. Now with the way that you have opted to collect mason jars, how have you tried to capture different pieces of history over the course of the evolution of the mason jar as we know it here in the United States?
Okay, yeah. I mean, yeah, and it is a very Northeast thing, So I'm not really like a completionist. Really, what
Hmm.
I do is I have a piano in our back room, and all my jars are on the piano. It's pretty much full. So my rule of thumb is I'm not buying anything unless it's so insanely unique I have to have it,
Yeah.
which hasn't really happened in a long time. I don't think I've bought a jar in a while. I think the last jar I bought might have been 3 years ago, which was this one, which came from Chicago. Generally speaking, they didn't really travel too much. They didn't get very far. I don't see jars from other states for the most part. The basic area, the tri-state area, New
Hmm.
Jersey, New York, but I've never seen like that. And this one's nothing too fancy. I mean, it does have a big screw metal on it. What was kind of bizarre is the top on it is so big and heavy. It almost looks like an ashtray.
Oh
And
wow.
and it I one thing I noticed about other glass people, other glass guys, no one really wants to pay like full price. Not that these jars are really worth that much. I mean, there's price sheets on them, but unless it's something obscenely rare, they're not worth too much. 10, 15, $20 for the most
Hmm.
part. And this is probably the most I ever paid was only $8, I think, for this one. And it was like a little sign on it that said, it's a unique canning jar. And I go up to them and I said, what a coincidence! I collect unique canning jars. But and I've also kind of dual used them because when we go to auctions, we buy lots of things, dominoes, dice, and stuff. And
Hmm.
sometimes I just like a piece, and I was like, well, what can you do with this stuff? I realized, well, I've got all these clear jars. Why not start putting the stuff in the jars? That's not even the best example. Like all these random marbles I have, just start
Oh.
filling them up. But it's just a way to others things. Or like, here we go. Here's a bunch of different dice I have. Just some really weird ones. Some of them really old wood.
Yeah,
Dice
yeah.
stuff. And I don't think any of them are ivory.
I don't
Couldn't
see any RPG uh, dice in there. Do you have any like 16-sided dice?
No, I do
No,
not.
no.
Um, but just like these giant black dice are just really bizarre.
Oh yeah,
Actually,
that's
it's a slight
beautiful.
reddish brown color. It's semi-translucent, but it was
Yeah,
just so weird. It's like I can't sell this. What am I gonna get for it? $1 or two? I find it too cool to sell.
yeah, yeah. The intrinsic value too is nice, and that actually brings up a question that I like to ask a lot of collectors is when I had been going through, I'm going to take a tangent here. When I normally go through my research, I try to find out, what pieces are normally of interest to collectors. And I noticed that some mason jars are like fetching like $1,000, and some are like $250, and others are like $500. So, I mean, obviously those are rare pieces, and within a collection, like you said, not very many collectors ultimately really want to pay top dollar for what's in their collection. So why do you choose the pieces that you get, and what mason jars have a special story behind them for you?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, like, you know, part of it is, I mean, obviously, if you pay full price, it's like there's no story, there's no bragging, right?
Yep.
It's like, especially if it's like I said, a lot of them aren't worth a lot. If this jar's worth $20, and I go to a garage sale and it's there for a quarter, that sounds for me, that's like, oh, that's pretty cool. I can brag about that,
Yeah.
$20 jar for a quarter, But I have found different ones in different places. Let's see. One I can tell two parts about. I was at some woman was selling her mother's estate, and they only wanted like $4 for this one. And this is really interesting for a couple of reasons. Number one, it has a lot of embossed words. I know it doesn't show up too well on camera, but it's
Yeah.
nice thick embossed words. Embossing on bottles has kind of become a lost art, because thanks to cheaply printed labels.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we had focus for a second.
Yeah, I can see it a little bit. It's one of those type. So that's words. Is it in
It'll be in
almost
the
like
mold.
a mold, or is it around like almost like is the are the words in like in a frame, or do they wrap around the glass?
They're in a general area. If it's hard to show up on camera, you'll see on a lot of glass because it'd be a mold. It's two pieces and they're laying flat and
Yeah.
they pour the glass into it. So if you look, you'll see that there's a line that goes down. It doesn't show up on camera, but you'll see it in older glassware. And the other thing is too, glass is very imperfect back then. If this isn't the best example, you get some of these older pieces and you'll find like lots of bubbles, lots of faults. Like, here's a really bad one. Like this isn't a crack. It's that bad. Giant bubbles.
Oh yeah, no, I see it.
The defects, and without a doubt, obviously, glass collectors love defects because we live in a world where glass is perfect now. You've got glass windows in your house that are crystal clear, perfect. So the more complex that people generally find that interesting, I find it interesting too. I will say that the embossing is coming back. By the way, I was saying it's a lost art. Past couple years, I've started to see it pop up for liquor bottles a little bit, and it's just a cool way. It looks really nice in person. I wish it could really show up on camera.
Oh, it shows up now. It's showing up quite nicely.
Yeah.
I
But,
think if you actually hold it away, the camera's able to pick it up a little bit better. Yeah, right there.
It looks beautiful in person, and it's like I said, it's starting to pop up. You're starting to see this in stores a little bit more now, so that's coming back. And so, like I said, I got this very cheaply. What's also interesting about it is, so we mentioned earlier about screw mechanisms are fairly modern. Because think about it, what would it take to make a screw mechanism? Glass is a molten liquid. You're pouring it, and it's like they did it by hand. So what would happen is a lot of times, and if you look at glass, this is a good giveaway about where the age is. If you modern glass these days, if it's molded like they are back a few decades ago, the line will go all the way up to the top because the screw piece is part of the mold. Because we've got molds that are refined enough that they can perfect it, put it together, and the thing screws on. But there was a time where they actually made the screw mechanism by hand. They would literally take just a piece of glass and like a dripper and spin it and just get lucky and lots and lots of practice, which is crazy when you think about it. It would have taken a lot of practice to get that right. But the early mechanisms were different. So this one is pretty interesting because the screw is on the inside. The screw is in the cap.
Oh, okay.
And so the screw's on the inside, and it's hard to see too. It's I don't know exactly how they made it. The fat part here is layered on. It's put on. So I'm not really sure how they made this. I guess they could have made like a metal rod and they screwed onto.
And then,
But it's definitely interesting.
Almost like maybe like a drill bit maybe, and then pull it out the molten.
Yeah,
that would be interesting.
But if you do look at some of these pieces, I'm trying to see if I have a piece that does. You'll see that I can't find one on top of my head, but usually, when they get older, they'd make this would be the mold, just this part, and this was being made separate because the invention of the screw mechanism was a big deal. And yet again, Ball Mason, I don't know which company invented it. They bought it. They bought it quick. And
I think Mason was the one that came up with that from my.
I believe so. But Ball was very smart to buy anything that was an improvement to canning because we're talking about a time when there was no refrigerators, there was no freezers. You ate what was fresh, and the only thing, anything else you had to can it. And how are you gonna eat something that's 3 or 4 months old if it's not well preserved? So Ball was smart, and they jumped on every little improvement, no matter how petty, because they never knew what was gonna be the next big thing. Yeah. Back on the subject of like interesting stories or whatever. So I don't have anything like insanely rare, but also to refer back to colors. If you kind of see that has a slight purple tinge.
Oh no, the purple's coming out very well.
So that's when they made this, it wasn't that color. When they made this, it was clear, and it's magnesium, which gives it the purple color. What's been
Okay.
happening for the past 100 years is that when UV light from the sun hits it, it's slowly activating the magnesium and making it turn purple. So I actually leave this sitting in a window to kind of age it up. But if I had like a white background, maybe it'll look a little bit better. It starts to turn, amethyst. So
Yep.
this one I got for free, and this is actually a kind of a simple and funny story. Literally, just me and my wife were just bored. We were looking at on Craigslist, what's free, and someone had a garage sale, and
Yeah.
they said, we just everything. It's like everything that didn't sell, we just threw on the side of the curb, and I was like, it's like a Sunday night, like 7 p.m. We were just bored. I'm like, this isn't gonna be a waste of a trip. Let's just go see what they got, because it was an estate sale, so there's a lot of stuff. It was an entire house full of stuff, and it's a pile of various things. We picked up a few things, and this is just sitting in the pile. So I would actually say this might be one of my rarest jars, and I got it for free in a garbage pile.
And I think that was actually the actual mason jar that spawned our actual connection with this show. So I think that's really cool that you're showcasing that.
Now, this another interesting jar I have is, so I'd say glassware in general peaked in the 1970s in collectability. Things like, there's other glass like carnival glass. That's the stuff that's usually iridescent, and it's like a dark, deep color like purples and blues. That came from the literal depression, where it was metallic salts were applied to give it that iridescent effect. I don't have any right here to show you. I have some in other rooms, but it since the Great Depression kicked in, there was a lot of that glassware made. It didn't sell, so it got given to carnivals, and then carnivals gave away as a prize, hence the term carnival glass. So,
Okay.
but anyway, so that was a hot item in the 70s, and glass in general was hot. The prices went through the roof for a moment because people thought it was really rare, and then what happened was, people hear it's worth so much, I've got some of that in my cabinet, and then the market got flooded.
Yeah.
It's the eBay effect before the internet. And then
Yeah.
things that were worth a lot suddenly weren't worth anything anymore. So during that time, obviously, you're always going to have people trying to make some money and do whatever. There was a lot of inspired and or bootlegs starting to creep up in the 70s. So one of those is actually this jar here, and these were referred to as the fantasy jars. So as you can see, this color is intentional. It's intentionally dyed, and this one's actually even iridescent. If you look at it, and
Oh, wow.
a slight amber. There is some jars that are amber. Those are probably the most valuable, but the ones that are officially amber are super, super dark, like beer bottle dark.
Okay.
So these were made in the 70s, even though they're replicating a jar that was pretty much approximately the 1900s. And if you look, it's actually a smaller version.
So just to pause here, so you're actually saying that there were these manufacturers that came along and said, hey, we can capitalize on this infatuation with glass that you said, with antique glass that came about around the 1970s, and they were actually trying to replicate this stuff. And were they trying to sell it for what antique glass was also fetching at that point in time, or was it recognized by people at that point as being a knockoff?
That's a good question. It was pretty much sold to be a knockoff, but anyone that really knew this stuff would know, because even though it does say Mason on here, the classic, patent November 30th, 1858. It was, if you look, it's literally a smaller version of this jar for the most part. I have some that I don't have them. Oh, here we go. That replicate the top a little bit more. Here we go. Here's the one that's actually replicating, but it's not the same size. Generally, this size didn't really exist back then, so it was kind of sold as kind of a spoof. But they wanted to make it more interesting because they added the colors. And being the 70s, the only thing you had was publication, so it wasn't like there was a super, super easy way to distribute information. So I'm sure a lot of people bought these not knowing that they weren't replicas. But here's the thing. They're one of a kind because these colors didn't exist back then, so they're very unique. And what's funny is these spoof jars are worth more than the real thing now. This one not really worth that much. Could be worth maybe $12. These $40.
Wow.
Because they're unique. They're just cool colors, and that's kind of why people collect, because they want something different. Who cares that there's a million of these jars? These aren't worth anything at all. You're lucky if you can get $4 for this jar, and with new versions being made where you get like 12 for $15. The value is basically non-existent. But these are pretty unique because of their colors. So these are some I picked up from an estate sale. I think I paid 15, $20, and I was pretty happy about it.
Yeah, yeah. So getting back to again the reason why you collect mason jars, I mean, was it what your first mason jar that you picked up and said, I want to have this? Why mason jars? Why did you go down that road? And we're going to be talking about some other glassware that you have, which is, to me, doing the research on it, that made more sense in terms of collecting than mason jars, unless you're going out for like some of the really unique pieces. And you, of course, showed us some of those, but like what made you get into collecting the mason jars themselves?
That's a pretty hard question, actually, because it kind of just happened. Like I said, these were the first jars I was running across, because these were pretty common. These were really mass produced, and there's a lot of these. And the color was just interesting because it's a nice strong blue, but still being clear. I just like the color, and then I just started seeing more in some bizarre shapes. It's kind of like going down the rabbit hole. For people to get into professional cameras, you buy a $5,000 or $6,000 or $1,000 camera, and the next thing you know, you're buying $2,000 lenses. You start to go really deep in that rabbit hole really quick. So it wasn't like some kind of like, I wake up one day, oh, I know, I'm going to collect mason jars. It just kind of starts slowly happening. And I just like the colors and glassware in general. So that's just how it is, And I'd see different pieces, like I didn't even know about these, as they call them, the fantasy jars. I just saw them one day. I'm like, oh man, these are wonderful. I've never seen this ever, not even online. And, after I bought it, I started to look it up and learn about it. But I bought it because I just, had never seen it before. And that's how it happens. It's another unique piece. You go to flea markets and antique sales, and you just start seeing really random things, random pieces, and once in a while something catches your eye. Be it for me, like really fancy embossing, I find interesting, or just the colors,
Yeah.
Because another thing we can, to move past the mason jars, because I kind of have three different things here in general. We showed some of the mason jars and stuff. I also collect some very smalls. These are pretty more common. These were usually bitters, for like liquor. So, we use, these days, most people use something called, mixers, being like a sugar syrup. But that wasn't the case, many years ago. And actually, this is coming more into fashion than ever, is bitters. So these would be like, fermented extracts from like oranges and other fruits and stuff like that, they would refine and sell for making much more complex and interesting drinks. Drinking liquor wasn't the sugar fest that it's become, especially in the 90s and 2000s. But they'd make lots of fancy little ones. This is like a little lighthouse. And red, by the way, red's not a color you see too often these days. And you're probably wondering why. Of all the colors, why is red so abnormal? In fact, if you go to some place like Hobby Lobby or whatever and look at glass, if you do see red and look at it closely, more often than not, the inside is painted a faint red color, and the glass is not red. So the reason is because in order to make red glass, you've got to use gold. And while it's not a lot of gold, it's still a cost that companies don't want to accept anymore.
Wow. Okay.
It's a mixture of gold and something else to get to this red color.
That's really neat.
But there's just lots of little colors from different bottles and bitters.
I like these little bottles. They're really. Yeah, that almost like the one in your right hand almost looks like something from like an inkwell or something like that.
Yeah, this one's an inkwell here.
Oh, it is, okay.
And it's pretty common to see, like, usually people's grandparents would have these in the window. I have them in our kitchen window on the windowsill because, the light comes through and it looks, they're really beautiful colors. You got like the cobalt blue. This was really common in the medicinal world, but this was also an inkwell. Okay. And then you have like amethyst, which is usually magnesium and something else. And yet again, more embossing, just different colors, these teal green colors. So
do you think that these little bitter, glass containers are going to make a resurgence with bitters coming back into fashion, or do you think they'll be using other types of bottles that aren't glass?
So there's probably the biggest company in the U.S. making bitters is pretty close, only an hour from me, in Rochester, New York, called the Fee Brothers. They're using just more of a traditional shaker, like a little 6 ounce shaker. So I don't think this will come back per se as bitters, but I do think these will come back because let's face it, everything's kind of a fad. You know, it's like once companies have worn out the mason jar thing, and I think we're probably on the crest of that. I think we've probably hit the height of that. It's like companies are going to look for more things, and there's going to be some people like, oh yeah, my grandmother used to have little things like these, and they won't even know what or why they are. But
Hmm.
I wouldn't be surprised to start seeing these pop up in a year or two in stores to go for $1 or $2. Because let's face it, if you're a company that makes glass, if you can pop these out for $2 or $3, that's a pretty good easy profit.
Yeah, and I would think that the mold you would be able to put a lot, a lot of those into a single mold and be able to
hmm
crank them out.
hmm But I just like, I mean, I've just kind of learned, I've just kind of like just glass and ceramics in general. And by the way, this one's a piece of corn,
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see the leaves coming up on it.
old docks, and it says Cure. No idea what it really is. Probably still a bitters bottle because they were all that size. They were supposed to be collectible when they sold them.
Yeah,
And for me,
I
it's
wonder
like
if it had like corn syrup or something in it.
they could have. It's rather
Yeah.
small, but for me, it's like anything glass. Like here's a hollow owl
Oh
that it's like
yeah.
probably from the '70s. Who knows? But it's just like it's just so one of a kind and unique. I just find it interesting. I'm not. I don't
Was that a
buy.
bottle or was that just
No,
a
it's
statue?
solid. It was just an art piece.
Okay.
you know for me it's just like just whatever catches my eye, and smaller things. I'm not into art glass. That's a whole different genre in itself, way
Yep.
more than I want to know. But just anything, it could be, it's like I saw this at a random garage sale, this really bizarrely colored jar, and he wanted a fair amount for just a jar, like $8. And I saw it and I looked at it, I'm like I don't even need this. And I'm looking at it, home hemming, and the guys there at the garage sale, and he bought the jar because he liked it too. It's like, I said, I have no use for this, and I can't not buy it. And he basically kind of admitted I'm the same way. He's like, I just thought it was interesting too. It's just, it's like, and stuff like this is starting to pop up. You might see something that looks like this in Target now, but this is where it came from. And yet again, you can, if you look around, same thing. If it pops up, the bubbles in the
Yep.
glass inconsistency. So, and you can see that it's been laying in a mold because the surface is by no means smooth. It's a
Uh-huh.
little indented. You get these crazy reflections out of it.
Yeah, and that one was kind of that bluish that you had shown us that was from the ball, but it was definitely, it looks like it was intentional versus.
Oh yeah, yeah. Because when it's naturally in the sand, it's very faint. There's
Yeah.
a color there, but it's not super intense. But when they're going on purpose, they usually heavy-hand it because they're going for full effect.
Yeah.
You know.
You mentioned art glass. Have you and your wife had a chance to go down to Nashville to the art and glass museum in Nashville?
No, are you talking about Nashville, Tennessee?
No, Nashville. I'm sorry, not Nashville. Wow,
Corning.
Norfolk, Virginia.
No, I haven't. You know what? There is a large company here in New York. There's
Corning.
Corningware, and now people probably actually know Corningware. If you've ever heard that term, they made the infamous measuring cup, the glass measuring cup.
Yep.
They make your phone screen, Corning
Yep.
glass, acrylic glass, and they're just known for their plate. They make glass plates that if you drop them, they generally don't break, and a lot of cooking ware. That's actually rather close to the Corning. It's Corning, New York, Corningware. We haven't visited it yet, and it's only like an hour from my house. I actually, random fact, I actually turned down a job offer from them at one point. I was interviewing for different places, and I actually, this is the iPhone had come out, and they weren't that big of a company at that point, but
Yeah.
I actually turned down a job offer. Not that I'm saying I regret it. It is kind of funny that here I am years after that. I've become a huge glass collector, and they're a glass company, but.
Yeah, well,
Random.
if you guys get down to again Norfolk, so for all my listeners, I apologize for the confusion there, but yes, it's the art museum and where you can actually go and watch them actually make these very cool glass pieces, and you can, if you go up a level in terms of your admission, you can actually participate in a glass class that will like lasts like part of the afternoon, but it's very cool. And they have pieces not only featuring art glass, but also glassware like we're seeing, of course, within Travis's, with, of course, your collection today. So perfect. But definitely go there if you have a chance and if you like seeing that type of stuff made. Now, turning to some of the other pieces that you have, we were talking about a little bit about uranium ware, which
Hmm.
is also known as vaselineware.
Yep, yep. Usually goes hand in hand.
Not that you wear, but that you actually use.
Glassware,
Yes. What about this type of glass was really interesting to you? Again, the color, I think, is what most collectors go for, the uranium ware, and maybe you can give some better history on what uranium ware actually is and the fact that it is safe to use and you're not going to subject yourself to unwarranted, of course,
levels.
radioactivity.
Yes, yes. So it's usually there's the greater term is depression wear. It has nothing to do with the depression era. It's because the glass was pressed, so they would push these decor patterns into it. Hence, that's the real reason why it's called depression, glass. And
Okay.
there was mostly just during that era. There was, for the most part, only pretty much two colors. There was a peachy kind of color, a pinky peachy color, and this green color. This isn't the best example here. I mean, this one's got a nice strong color to it, and this color came from the fact that it's uranium, as in radioactive. And at the time, they thought it was safe. It comes from the ground. Uranium's everywhere in the ground, and it's not that dangerous. I mean, obviously refined uranium, just pure uranium, is dangerous. Just like you don't want to be playing with a big blob of lead, but
Yeah.
it's in very minute amounts, pretty harmless. If in regards to how dangerous it is, well, holding this piece is no more radiation than you standing in the sun at noon. And while you probably don't want to stand in the sun for 24 hours, being outside is pretty harmless in and of itself. So that's how strong it is. So it's safe to touch. It's safe to use. You wouldn't, for example, want to say put this on your dining room table and fill it with candy and let it sit in there for a month and pop the candy. That's it's probably more radiation than you probably want.
Well, actually, what I found through my research, Travis, is that there's actually more radioactivity in like a potato than you would find if you were to use anything for serving food in
Yeah.
uranium ware.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, touching is harmless. If
Yeah.
I'm actually planning, I have a lot of plates and stuff which I don't have in front of me now, but I was actually going to do a party. So one of the cool things about uranium ware is uranium does react to UV light. So um, I was going to have I'm going to have a blacklight party because all the stuff glows. It's kind of bright, so I may not see. But if you see,
Oh yeah.
you can see that really strong green effect.
Mm-hmm.
That's what happens when black light hits uranium ware. And this is also the easiest telltale sign. Now, if you start collecting it, you can tell by looking at it. It has a very specific shade of green. And what's interesting is when you look at the glass dead on, it's almost barely green at all. But
Mm-hmm.
as you look at an angle, when a bunch of glasses together, it gets
Yep.
this very strong green color. So it has a unique property to it than most dyes glass colors have. So it
Yeah.
does stand out. But this is the telltale sign because this is actually like a club. It's the top of a pen for clubs. So it came with an invisible marker, and you could mark people's hands and then look at it.
Yeah.
But it's the smallest dark light I could come across. It's black light. So because obviously you apply this to something else that's just green, it's not going to happen. There's no effect there.
Oh
There's
yeah,
no
that's a big difference.
Yeah, it just there's no glow to it. And of course,
Mhm.
if you did this, with no sun, it's really strong. It's super bright.
Mhm.
A lot of collectors will actually put their stuff under a UV light because it has such a strong effect.
Yeah. And from what I also understand, a lot of people that collect uranium ware also like having it by their window because as the sun is setting, the way that the UV rays, of course, comes through the window towards dusk, um, actually entering into the glass makes the glass look really cool too. So, do you have any other pieces like that you put close to the window to take that effect, or
Not with
most?
these. I live right in right almost right in my city, so all the houses around me are 2.5, 3 stories. So you
Ah,
don't get
darn it.
that angle of sun. When the sun starts to set, you can't see it anymore. So,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of interesting pieces. I have some dishes that are packed away. I figured to show some more interesting individual pieces and things that are really bizarre. So, um, uh, it's not for. I also want to rewind half a subject too, because you mentioned
Yeah.
about like, or why do I collect it?
Yeah.
It's not really the color, because the color for me, I mean, the effect is really cool, right, with the black light, but the color is cool and unique. But it's not, for me, that's not the strongest point, because I mean, there's so many cooler colors too. This is
Uh-huh.
a favorite piece of mine too. It's a juicer, by the way.
Okay.
But it's, you know what, it's actually the macabre aspect is why I like it, because it is uranium. It is technically radioactive. That
Okay.
alone is like, that's pretty crazy. That's a radioactive plate. Yeah, you're eating off a radioactive plate. That's kind of wild. And by the way, we did use this in one of our videos. We did our video series is about events and drinking alcohol cocktails, and we
Yeah.
did a couple of videos where we actually, because I have a bar set up, we a studio set up in our house of a bar and everything, and we actually use this to juice the limes or lemons. And yet
Oh,
again,
cool.
perfectly safe.
What's a video somebody can watch that where you featured a close up of you using the juicer? Can you
This
think
one,
of any?
if you search for a series, it's part of Society Girl. If you just go on YouTube and search Society Girl, girl with a U, and it's gonna try to spell correct you. You gotta click the word so it
Yeah.
actually searches the misspelled word. But it was called Cocktail Diaries.
Cocktail Diaries. Okay, I'll
Yeah,
link to that in the show notes for everybody as well.
and that does pop up in there. It's just a cool piece, and unique
That is.
colors.
Yeah.
Obviously, the more uranium they use, the stronger the color. So this piece, not a lot. This piece, more. I've heard it varies as much as 2% to 25%. I have no way to know how much is in these pieces. I mean, if someone that has a Geiger counter could probably run it across it, and maybe someone has figured out a way to measure radioactivity to the concentration. But and I've actually looked at Geiger counters just to buy as a for like a gimmick.
Yeah.
But I learned they're a little pricey. Even a cheap Geiger counter will run you about 150. So I was like, I just don't care that much.
Yeah, I'm sure you can get a lot of glass for that.
But when they were doing this vaselineware, the uranium ware, everything was they just liked the color, so they did it for everything: plates, cups. This is by the way, this is a sherbet glass, so you put ice cream or sherbet in this to eat out
Mm-hmm.
of. The juicer. Heck, I even have the top of a coffee percolator is uranium ware, and there's even things like fuses where the inside of the fuse, the glass was uranium just for the color. But I mean, ashtrays, uranium.
Yep. Yep.
Um, I've seen
Actually, I want to cut to an actual screen share here. We'll actually showcase that ashtray in more detail really quickly here.
sure. I've seen a fishbowl that was uranium as well.
Yeah, that should come through really quick, nicely there.
It's so common. It's not so well documented. Because I like the macabre aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Like, as far as I can tell, this piece doesn't exist because I've Googled for it and I can't find it. The craziest thing I would love to find would be a baby bottle. I would love to find a uranium baby bottle, because it's just so absurd in hindsight
Yeah.
now that we know what uranium is and does.
Well, I like this piece because of the macabre aspect, because you have it's an ashtray for a cigarette, so it's like you get yeah, exactly.
and it's radioactive.
Yeah.
More cancer. So
Now there's two other pieces here in this photo that we're showcasing right now. So are those also smaller ashtrays, or did you just put it there for display purposes?
nope. If you come back to me, I have them right here in my hand.
Okay.
And these are interesting tidbits that are lost in history. So there's three different pieces. These two are technically the same purpose. So
Okay.
Carpets. Before there was carpets, everyone just had wood floors, and
Yep.
a lot of furniture would actually have wheels on them, even like couches and stuff. I have no
Oh
idea
yeah,
why.
yeah.
So
I know where you're going with this.
if it shows up, let's see. Switch back to me. This is actually this isn't flat. It's actually a half circle.
Uh-huh.
This is the wheel would sit in here. So these are coasters. So
Yeah.
the idea was, because obviously the wheels, if they keep moving around your wood floor, would scrape it up and ruin it. So
Yeah.
these were super common. You'd buy glass coasters, because this, if it moves, it's not going to hurt the wood floor. And
Yep.
so they'd be either for just round flat wood, or just shaped like the wheel itself.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this one is actually one of my other favorite pieces, because of the macabre aspect and what it is. So a lot of your viewers have probably seen this before, and they don't they probably don't remember what I'm talking about right now. They've seen this many times in their life. You can go see it right now. What this is, it's like a double thimble, too small
Okay.
to actually put anything with. I often like to test people with this, like, what do you think this is? And some people will guess, like, is it a shot glass? I'm like, no, it's not, it's too shallow. It's
Yeah.
just, um, and some people, could it be a salt pinch? And yet again, it's not really big enough to get your fingers in, just barely. What this is when you go to the dentist and they're cleaning your teeth, if you look over,
Oh.
you'll see they have a little glass piece. Don't know why, it's just tradition. And they're holding that toothpaste in the glass piece. And that's what
Yeah.
this is. This is a uranium glass toothpaste holder. So when the doctor takes his drill and he scoops up some more toothpaste and they put it on your, on your teeth,
Yep.
and I'm not sure if dentists are using this today, but I remember when I was a teenager, they were still using, non-uranium glass ones. So,
Yeah. I know that my dentist uses one that it looks like just like a little thimble, like you had mentioned, but it's like aluminum. So yeah, but I can reference like watching dentists on movies, and I remember seeing pieces like that. So that's pretty cool. It's interesting that they would have used uranium ware for that too.
hmm hmm
Very cool. So the way that you have uranium ware is mostly the green tint, but the Vaseline ware was more of a like yellowish color, like you had mentioned.
Yeah, there's some other
Um,
colors. I mean, that's not uranium, of course. I mean, sometimes these terms are ambiguous because depression means like the whole family of glass that is pressed.
okay.
Vaseline wear actually refers to the surface because it was smoother than previous glass, whereas I showed you some of this glass is really pitted, and you put your fingers over it. It's smooth, but
Oh,
it's pitted. Just
okay.
the process of glass was getting more refined. The glass is more refined. There's no bubbles in this, for example. It's really smooth and clear. What modern glass is now. So
Yes.
it was referred to as Vaseline because it's so smooth. It was like they felt like the glass was covered in Vaseline. That's where the term Vaseline ware comes from. So
Gotcha. I thought it was the actual tint of some of the glass where it was kind of like a yellowy, milkish color.
it's kind of both, kind of thing. It's not absolute where the term comes from, but I've heard, the feel of it and the color of it. And by the way,
Gotcha.
uranium was used in many different things too. By the way, not just this green glassware. There's another type of glass referred to usually as jadeite. It's not literally made out of the mineral or stone jadeite, but it does
Uh-huh.
look like it. That's why they say it. So this is actually a jadeite piece. It's a salt shaker, and it's using uranium because it's basically milk glass, which I think they were using titanium. Maybe I don't know how they got the whitish, but mixed with uranium, it gives it this faint minty green color. But if same thing, if
Oh,
it's hard to
wow.
see,
No, no, I
you
see
can
it.
kind of see the effect,
Yeah.
and if you can see it's kind of glowing. It's not just the light; it's actually it is kind of glowing in a creepy way now, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
That's that's the uranium. So this,
See, looking at that without having you put the black light up to it, I would have thought it was just like a ceramic. I mean, obviously it is glass, but I would have thought it would be like just a white ceramic piece, not
mhm.
uranium ware.
Yeah, so there's a style of glass called milk glass, which is white. I forget what they use offhand. Usually white is titanium. I just don't know if they had titanium dust back then. In fact, a lot of the older lids, the zinc lids for the mason jars, they use milk glass on the inside of it, for that glass to glass seal, and then they,
Uh-huh.
although this one's screwed, but this is very common. Um, but yeah, yep, it's that faint green, and then of course it lights right up. I didn't even know this was uranium. I had this for a pretty long time. I just couldn't sell it. One of the problems with salt and pepper shakers is they'd often use a top that could rust, so
Uh-huh.
the salt destroys the tops. So there's so
Oh
many
yeah.
old salt shakers in this condition, no top, because the
Huh.
top is destroyed.
Makes sense.
And jadeite is worth a fair amount. It's not like super expensive, I, a lot of this, it's since it's so functional, it doesn't get worth a lot of money, which is great as a collector because let's face it, who wants to get into a collecting hobby where you gotta start popping $100 an item?
Yeah,
That's a
that's
little
true. That's true.
that's a little pricey.
Yeah. There's plenty of people that do that when it comes to action figures, though, especially if they're looking at the posable action figures like from a certain company that I've talked about before, but we will leave them unnamed this episode.
Mhm. And but anything that's glass and weird, I kind of get into. This is like a medicine stopper, and I just like it. It's just so smooth on top. It's just the way it fits in your hand. It's almost like a stress relief kind of thing. You can just sit here and just rub it, you know, like that. Or I love to show this one to people because people see this and they're like, "What is that?" Because if you've got a twisted mind, you're like, "What am I looking at?" This piece, you know. So people see this and they're like, "What the heck is that for?" You know, it's all ridged here, and
Yeah.
find out what it really is, you're like, oh, that's kind of dumb and simple. Um, no, it's not a medical device. It has no bizarre personal use. It's a universal percolator thing. So, and these actually get worth a fair amount of money. These go for about $12 a pop now because let's face it, glass tends to break, and
Yeah.
if you're into coffee percolators or you just like to use them, you
Yep.
drop the glass is going to break. So this is a universal replacement. It actually sits in the percolator. I'm not too familiar with the percolator, so I can't say how it works, but
Uh-huh.
it fits in them and it'll fit most percolators. So I'd pick these up for literally like a quarter or $1 at a garage sale, and then
Yeah.
I could sell them for $12 or so.
Well, when you were just showing the portion in the middle, it reminded me of a paperweight that my grandmother had, that kind of had a dumbbell effect on both sides. But that's very cool. It's interesting that get these other pieces that don't necessarily fit into the mason jar or the uranium ware, but it's just glassware as a whole you enjoy and you find joy in, of course, collecting. So the pieces that you have, are you trying to get rid of any, or is this all your own personal collection?
It's all my own personal collection. I don't have a lot of stuff. As far as the mason jars, they all fit on the top of a stand-up piano, so that's only like, 2 or 3 square feet. So
Yeah.
I'm not looking to add, and I'm not looking to get rid of. I kind of have the perfect amount. The uranium ware I did buy with the intention of selling, only to
Uh-huh.
find out I pretty much had. When I first got into this, I ran into an estate where this is what they collected, and they actually had an appraiser, and they basically appraised it for what it was worth, and I paid that price. Only to discover I basically paid what it's worth. So it's like all I can do is get my money back. So it's like, I'll keep it for now,
Yeah.
but I'll probably sell it eventually. I think after I finally have a black light party, I'll have a reason to get rid of it because I've
Yeah.
accomplished my goal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some pieces I'll never get rid of, just some of these weird ones or just these really unique ones. They're too cool, to ever get rid of. When they're only worth a couple bucks, it's more interesting for a conversation piece.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Especially when you're making cocktails and you can say, "Yeah, I'm trying to give you cancer or something." like that. You didn't know what you were signing up for. Well, perfect. Well, I'm so glad that you were able to come on the show and showcase all these pieces. And I think you were alluding to the fact that before we went live, that you have a lot of other collections that you can definitely share, but we don't have time for that. So hopefully you've enjoyed your time here on the show, and you would definitely hopefully come back. But before you answer that, I do have some kind of off the wall questions that I hope you're okay with me throwing at you. Is that fine with you, Travis?
Go for it.
All right, cool. So, being the fact that I'm going to change up the question a little bit for you. Being the fact that you enjoy putting together cocktails and doing like these little parties and everything, if you and your wife were going to be going on a trip to Mars, and if you only could have 3 earthbound meals and 3 earthbound drinks, adult beverages. This can be a wine, this can be a beer or a mixed drink. What would those meals be? And if they're home cooked or from a restaurant, please specify the restaurant also. And if it's home cooked, who would make it for you? And then the drinks, obviously, reference that information too. But 3 homebound meals and drinks before you go to Mars. What would those be?
Okay. That's a pretty easy one, I think. I've really learned to love Thai, so I think a classic, red curry Thai dish, is always a safe one for me. It's spicy, it's light, it's
Mm-hmm.
not unlike American food, is not heavy on fat. Very fresh ingredients. Um, I guess a good de facto would be some kind of Mexican dish. Nothing, probably more, I guess, Tex-Mex, right? I mean, I am in New York. I don't know what real Mexican food is, but I hate to list something specific like Chipotle, but like a burrito or something, a chicken burrito. I'm a chicken and shrimp kind of guy. I was actually never a huge fan of red meat.
Yeah.
I don't intentionally not eat it. I mean, I do eat a lot of hamburgers, but I'm not bending over backwards to have it. I haven't had a steak in years. It's just not the most exciting thing for me. Not that I dislike
Okay.
it.
Okay.
Third thing, wow. I guess it would be pizza or a burger, right? I mean, I'm sure that everyone says that answer. It's a pretty common, popular American food.
It
So that's
is, it is. But again, what I'm trying to get into, like where you find, like where your mouth, if you think about like these meals right now, where your mouth starts to salivate. So that red curry, is that something that you and your wife would make, or that somebody that makes a really good red curry, or a good restaurant in the area of Syracuse that somebody should visit if they wanted that?
yeah. I mean, I only discovered Thai only about 10 years ago, so I was a little late in the game for that. Here in Syracuse, there's a place called Irwin's that makes a pretty good Thai dish. Um,
Yeah.
where I really discovered it was a place called like Isan in Rochester. That's probably the best example of it I've ever had. And that was like a block from where I was living too, ironically, it was like the little hipster. If you were to take a day out in Rochester, it was going to
Yeah.
be that strip where we lived. So Park Ave. So that's the best place for it.
Good, good, good. And then the chicken and shrimp burrito. You said that you wouldn't want to name a nationwide chain, but you
No,
definitely
definitely
know
not.
of a.
There was a place here in our city that was called Boom Boom Mex. It's actually it was a Mexican couple that come up here for about 6 months out of the year, and they would make dishes, and then they'd go back to Mexico the other
Uh-huh.
6 months. So they left for the winter. We have really harsh winters here in New York. We have the highest snowfall in the U.S. If I recall, and as far as cities go, we average around 160 inches a year. So obviously they didn't want to put up with that. So
Yeah.
they finally, I think they finally retired, and someone else bought the restaurant from them and is trying to recreate the dishes, and they're doing a pretty good job. Obviously not as good as the original person, but they're doing a very good job. So I guess if I had to pick a place for Mexican food, it would be them.
Okay. All right. Cool. And then the pizza. Obviously, with the New York style pizza that you can get in New York, and then what you can get in the Buffalo, Rochester area. Is there a go-to place for your last pizza before you go to Mars?
You know what? A brand new place that just opened up only a couple weeks ago. A bigger chain known as Dinosaur Barbecue. Their sauce is getting around. They
Yeah.
just opened a pizza place next door to their original location, and that's actually one of the best pizzas I've ever had. As far as like a straight up traditional like a pepperoni pizza, they have their
Yeah.
own take on it, but it's definitely was really good.
What was the name of the place again?
Oh, it's owned by Dinosaur Barbecue, but I forgot what it's called.
Okay, if you can't, don't stress it. We can, you can send me the information, and I can put that in the show notes. So for anybody going to Rochester, or sorry, not
Syracuse.
Rochester, to Syracuse, can definitely check
It,
that out.
it's called a Pizza Regional.
Pizza
One word.
Regional.
A
Okay.
pizza. Sorry, a pizza space Regional.
Okay.
Um, really
Perfect.
outstanding little place. As far as drinks, let's
Yep.
see. Um, I'm not a beer guy. I've never liked hops, and
Wow.
that sounds horrible considering that me and my wife, our whole stick is cocktails and stuff. But my wife loves, she loves hops. So how funny! My wife is the one drinking the beer, and I'm like, I like ciders, and
Ciders. Okay.
we are in a cider country. There's a lot of great ciders up here. My favorite one these days is actually a local one now. It's a company called Beacon Skiff, but they sell the cider under the name 1911.
Mm-hmm.
They've been expanding by leaps and bounds these past year or two. They're probably just starting to ship the cider out of New York State now. I wouldn't be surprised if it's not somewhere around in your area. If you have a
Yeah.
Wegmans, I bet you they might have it. It's
Okay.
starting to get popular. Um, so it definitely is, a cider. Uh, I'm a huge tequila fan. Love tequila. Uh,
Tequila.
I'm a salt and sour kind of guy. So I got started with margaritas, and then I just moved on to better margaritas and better tequilas. And now I just drink tequila with lime juice on ice.
Very cool. I've tried to do like sipping tequila. I just can't do it. Maybe I'm doing it wrong. So maybe we can have a private chat after, of course, we go off air, and we can talk a little bit about how to properly sip tequila, and you can school me on that. Well, awesome. Well, thank you very much for those that food information, and we'll blast through these last two questions. What book has most influenced your life?
Hmm. Um, this might seem cliche being a programmer, but Bill Gates wrote a book called Business at the Speed of Light, and some people like to really like undermine Microsoft, say they're a really evil company because they buy things, whatever. But Bill Gates is incredibly intelligent, way more intelligent than most people realize, even to the point that he even admits in his own book back in the 90s that he undermined IBM and became the computer superpower in the 90s. And even in his own book, he admitted that it's inevitable when a company gets too big, it'll start to fail. And I don't see it as a coincidence that when Microsoft kind of hit the top of its peak and it started to go down in popularity as a product, Bill Gates retired because he saw it as an inevitability. Not saying that they're going to have to go out of business, but just that companies succeed and then they eventually waver off. But just lots of intelligent stuff. Very smart guy. People don't realize how smart he is. And by the way, one of the biggest philanthropists in the world.
Yes. Yeah, he and his wife have given plenty to the world, and they are still giving as not past tense. So that's really cool. Yeah, I have not heard of that book, so I will have to look more into that. Business at the Speed of Light, you said.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, very good. And you had mentioned when we had first started the show, when we were talking a little bit about Hannah Silver, that you had kind of dabbled around in music. So this next question is about music. If you were stuck on an island and your iPod or your MP3 player or phone could only play one song, what song would that be that you wouldn't get sick of?
Okay. I'm going to pick a song, and I'm going to have a bizarre reason why. If you'd asked me this question a couple years ago, I would have answered this. It's going to be In the End by Linkin Park. And now, if you had asked me, like, is Linkin Park my favorite band? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Wouldn't even make the top 50. They have a couple good songs. A lot of people have good songs. I listen to a lot of music. But there was a funny little internet story. Someone posted a screenshot. Someone told a story. I think it popped up on Reddit years ago. And he said, I have a coworker, and all he does is listen to that song nonstop on loop. Literally, like, it sounds like pure insanity. Nobody believed him. So the next day at work, he took a picture of his iTunes, and it had been played 65,000 times, that song. So validating the story. And then, of course, he told the person that he told the story, and he jumped on the Reddit discussion, and he posted a screenshot. And here was only a day or two later, and there had been another 300 plays on that song, proving that he really is playing the song nonstop.
Yeah.
It's give it a try. Play the song and let it loop. And you're like, I mean, like, it's actually not that, it doesn't really grate you. It's rather enjoyable.
In the End, okay.
Yeah.
In the End by Linkin Park. All right, well, I will check that out. All right. And then last question, who has had the biggest impact on your life? And if they watch or listen to this, what would you want to tell them? I know this is getting a little personal, so if you don't want to answer it, that's fine.
Oh, no. It's fine. The biggest influence he passed away a long time ago. It was actually my grandfather, and probably in a way he didn't even realize. My grandfather used to actually flip antiques too, unrelated to my hobby of it. Because he passed away when I was like 15 or so. He, at an auction, I liked computers. It was actually a TV show, Mr. Computer and Mr. Chips. It was like these little shorts. Schoolhouse Rock used to make them, I think.
Yeah.
I was really young. I was like probably 5 or 6. I just thought they were really interesting, and I thought computers were fascinating. So my grandfather bought an old Commodore VIC-20 at an auction for like $20. I used to spend every summer at my grandparents' house for a week, and he bought it, and I plugged it in and looked at the back of the manual and typed in the program that would make a game in BASIC, and which ironically was made by Microsoft, by the way.
Yep.
BASIC for the Commodore, and I would just take apart the game and start programming. So I was programming at 9 years old, games and stuff, and that basically seeded, I guess, my career in computing. where I got now.
That is really cool, and it's really cool how you how that my introduction with you as a programmer. You sum it up with what your grandfather got you started on back when you were a teenager. You said
He bought it when I was 9 years old.
9 years
He,
old.
he
Wow!
passed
So
away.
you were already programming when you were 9, 10.
Yep, yep. It's a shame that he passed away at 15 when I was 15 because he never knew that it became my career
Yeah,
years later.
that's really cool. That's a really cool story. Thank you for sharing that, Travis. Well, awesome. Well, everyone, that does it for our show today. Thank you so much for those that, of course, tuned in to watch Collectors Hangout, and to, of course, our podcast listeners. Thank you for listening. We are, again, listener supported, and as you know, we don't have any, of course, advertisements or anything on. So if you would like to continue to see or listen to our podcast, please definitely go over to collectorshangout.tv, and we have definitely ways that you can donate to continue to support our show. So thanks again for joining and being, of course, my guest this week, Travis. I want to, again, invite you back if you would like to showcase some of course, your other collections. And we will see everyone in Collectors Hangout the next time. Have a great one.
Thanks a lot. Catch you later.